far as how I came to write it, why it took so long to finish. If people could stop waving at me in the audience, that would be hugely helpful. And also, I'm not kidding or being ironic when I ask you to stop waving at me. You can yes, Hank can handle that stuff a lot better than I can. I want to talk about how the book came to be and why I wrote it, why it took so long to write, and a little bit about how I think we should orient our lives very quickly and broadly. Later I'll take some questions about the book and we can have a conversation then. So, I started writing this book shortly after I worked as a student chaplain at a children's hospital in Ohio, which was back in 2000. I spent about 5 months working at the children's hospital. While I was there, I saw a lot of sick and dying kids and got to know their families. It was in many cases, with their families and with young people when they died. And during that time, it was very difficult work. I really admire people who work in children's hospitals for longer than 5 months, which I couldn't do. I started to want to tell a story about the kinds of young people I was meeting, because I wasn't meeting these wise-eyed children with cancer who knew the secret to the meaning of life. I was meeting normal people who happened to have cancer and who were indeed very strong, which is the word you so often hear associated with people with cancer, but were not strong by, an inherent desire to be strong. They were strong because that was the only way to continue being a person, which is something that they liked and wanted to keep doing. And I wanted to write this funny, honest story about sick teenagers, but I also wanted to write the story of this dashingly handsome 22-year-old alcoholic hospital chaplain. And I wish I were kidding. And it was all like, which hot doctor will choose him? And it was all very self-indulgent, to be frank with you, and it was also really sentimental, even though I was trying hard not to write a sentimental or nostalgic story. Ultimately, I was writing a sentimental and nostalgic story because I wasn't writing the story as a gift for you. I was writing a story to try to process my own trauma, my own sense of pain, my own devastation in the wake of having known and cared for these young people, and having been forced to confront the reality that not all lives are long. I should add that it's a funny book, even though this is a serious talk. I tried to write this book. I ended up writing the book that became Looking for Alaska. I tried to write it again, and I wrote Catherine's. I tried to write it again, and I wrote Paper Towns. Then I quit writing it for a while because I was pretty sure that I couldn't do it. And every time I'd send some of it to my editor, she'd say, "This is great, but you should take out the chaplain." And I would be like, "Well, that's not possible. He is the core of the story." I suspect that I never would have gotten it written if I hadn't become friends with a Nerdfighter. For those of y'all who don't know, my brother and I make videos, which is why almost everyone who's here is here. The community that sort of surrounds our videos is called the Nerdfighter community, because we fight for nerd rights and for intellectualism. And I met and became friends with a young Nerdfighter who was 14 when I met her, and 16 when she died, named Esther Earl. And Esther's become such a huge part of our community in both her life and since she died, that it's difficult to speak about her. I knew her personally and was friends with her, but certainly not as close to her as many of her friends in our community, and certainly not as close as her family. But her family has embraced our community, and we've all become very close. And I should add that Esther's family set up a organization in her memory called This Star Won't Go Out, and it's a charity, and the proceeds go to benefit families of kids with cancer. And you can donate at the merch table, where they're selling books and T-shirts and Hank CDs, to This Star Won't Go Out tonight. And your donations up to $500 will be matched by us. And we've raised almost $10,000 in the first half of the tour. So we're hoping that. So we're hoping that you can keep that going, no pressure. yes, if you only have one, yes, if you know. T-shirts will only last you a couple of years. A donation to this star won't go out, will last forever. But seriously, do buy some T-shirts. So, in knowing Esther, it wasn't so much that Esther was sick. It was that she was a young, sick person who was extraordinarily empathetic and whose life was turned outward in a way that very few of our lives are. Who was very conscious and aware of other people, who found it easy to imagine others complexly, who understood the feelings of those around her. And that was the sort of central insight that finally allowed me to write this story. So, we have a choice in what we think about every second. It often doesn't feel that way, but we choose what we think about every nanosecond of every day of the time that we spend being conscious human beings. And that is a limited amount of time. It is a temporary thing, consciousness, and we choose the directions in which we devote our consciousness. If we are thinking about the relative health of Justin Timberlake's romantic relationships, that is a choice. We chose to think about it. If you're thinking about quantum physics, that is a choice. You chose to think about it. Every moment of your life, you are choosing what you think about. You are choosing how you are going to orient your life. You are choosing what your priorities and your values are going to be. And sometimes it feels like those are not choices, particularly I think when you're a young person and it feels like you don't have a lot of freedom, but you always have freedom inside your mind. Because the privilege of consciousness and the responsibility of consciousness is that you get to choose what you think about. And in choosing what we think about, we have to sort of orient our lives to try to live a good life, right? Like everybody wants to live a good life, everyone wants to be a good person, everyone wants to do something with their lives that will have, like, quote unquote, meant something or left a mark. Whatever it is that you think constitutes a good life, you want to do it. So we need to be really super freaking careful about what we define as a good life. And one of the things that I wanted to think about when I was writing this story, and one of the reasons that, Hazel gives Gus an Imperial Affliction and Gus gives Hazel this video game novelization, The Price of Dawn, is because those books represent very different models of what constitutes a good or heroic life. In The Price of Dawn, this guy, Staff Sergeant Max Mayhem, kills like 118 people in 221 pages, and he's always making these grand sacrifices, grand heroic sacrifices to save his comrades and our country, and that is certainly the model of heroism that we are all used to, right? Not just militarily, but that the only good short life is a capital H heroic life, in which there is some kind of grand sacrifice, whether it be for country or for comrades or for love, like in Romeo and Juliet, for instance. There always has to be this grand and noble sacrifice. Well, here's the problem. The first off, I think it's a terrible, terrible decision when you're 14 years old to be told that you can't marry the girl that you want to marry and respond to that news by killing yourself. I just spoiled Romeo and Juliet for some reason. Whatever, it's still a good play. Sorry. But that's an idiotic decision. That does not constitute a heroic life to me. And the truth is that almost all of us will never have the opportunity to jump on a grenade to save our buddies. Almost all of us will never have some grand opportunity to make a heroic gesture. So that leaves us with two choices, right? We can either live what is called a long and full life. Perhaps you have heard that phrase. I know that I have. My grandfather died a few weeks ago at the age of 92, and when I was at his funeral, people told me over and over again that my grandfather had lived a long and full life, which he did. And there is no question about it, and he lived a good life. But some of us don't get to live to be 92. And the question really at the center of The Fault in Our Stars, and also the question that I think all of us face in some ways, is what constitutes a good life? Is it possible to have a good life even if you don't have a long life? Is it possible to have a full life even if you don't have a long life? Because we have to confront that that is a reality. That has been part of the human species from the first humans. We have to acknowledge the reality of that. And I would argue that it is possible to lead a full and good life that isn't a long life? And that's really what I wanted to, that was sort of the core question at the beginning of The Fault in Our Stars for me. And it took me 12 years to find a way to answer that question, hopefully. But I really believe that while the responsibility of all fiction is to be true, as far as you can be true while lying, the other responsibility of fiction is to be hopeful, because I believe that the truth is always hopeful. So that's why I wrote The Fault in Our Stars and how I came to write it. And but I would like to talk more about heroism and how it works, and grand sacrificial gestures and whatnot and all that stuff that's in The Fault in Our Stars. But I feel like it would best be discussed in song. So. So it is now my pleasure to bring to the stage an extraordinarily accomplished young man who, in addition to being my brother, is the founding editor of EcoGeek.org, the world's largest environmental technology website. He's also the co-creator of DFTBA Records and the Projects for Awesome, YouTube's largest online charity event. He is the inventor of 2D glasses. Which render three-dimensional movies in a crisp 2 dimensions. And in 1998, his classmates at Winter Park High School